My dead brother knocked on the door last night. When I asked who it was, a voice answered. Soft, trembling, achingly familiar. "Let me in. It's cold in the ground." Please help me grow this channel by subscribing, like, and leave a comment below. The night carried no wind, yet the shutters rattled as if something breathed against them. In our village, silence after midnight meant the dead were walking, but no one dared to name it aloud. When the knocking came at our door, 3 slow thuds that shook the frame, my mother froze with a rosary half finished. My father's eyes drained of color. I knew the rhythm. It was the same way my brother used to knock when he came home late from hunting. But my brother had been buried 7 nights ago, beneath the ironwood tree where the soil never gives back what it swallows. And still, the knocking came. The first knock came on a night when even the dogs dared not bark. The moon was a thin, white nail scratching across the sky, and the village slept as if pinned beneath its light. Our house sat on the edge of the field, where the earth sank low and shadows always lingered longer than anywhere else. It was close to midnight when the sound rattled the wooden door. 3 slow thuds, heavy, deliberate, the kind that shakes itself into your bones. My mother froze mid-prayer, her lips parted, but no sound came out. My father's hand slid to the knife at his belt, though even he seemed too afraid to touch the hilt. My little sister whimpered, hiding her face in her hands. And me, I could not move, because I knew that knock. I heard it my whole life. My brother Elias had always knocked that way, 3 times, pausing as though to say, "It's me, let me in." But Elias had been dead 7 nights. He had been laid beneath the ironwood tree, its roots curling deep into the soil, its bark as black as burnt flesh. We had sealed the earth tight above him, and the priest had blessed the grave with holy water until his voice grew hoarse. Still, the knocking came. And when my father finally found the courage to whisper through the wood, "Who's there?" a voice answered, a voice I knew. "It's me," it said, trembling, familiar, too close. "It's cold in the ground. Let me in." The morning after the knocking, the house smelled of smoke. My father had burned a bowl of salt at the threshold, muttering prayers he had not spoken since he was a boy. The ash clung to the air like soot, but none of us said a word about the voice we heard. In our village, naming the dead after burial was like pulling them closer, like calling them back. But silence is a fragile thing. By midday, whispers spread. Children at the well told of seeing someone standing outside our house at dawn. A tall figure, head bent low, its hands pressed against the door. They swore they recognized Elias, though his skin was pale as milk and his eyes too dark as if filled with earth. My mother shut herself in her room. She prayed loud enough for the neighbors to hear, but her voice cracked with every word. I knew she remembered the same thing I did, the way the coffin lid refused to stay down. At the funeral, the earth itself seemed unwilling to take Elias. The men who carried his coffin swore it grew heavier with every step. so heavy their shoulders bruised black. When they lowered him into the grave, the ropes slipped twice, as if something below tugged at him. The priest's holy water hissed against the wood, steam rising as though the coffin burned from within. Still, we buried him. But 3 nights later, the village dogs howled at the ironwood tree, circling the grave until dawn. By the 7th night, their howls had stopped, not because they found peace, because they had vanished. Every last one of them. Now, after the knocking, I wondered if Elias had been laid to rest at all, or if we had sealed something else in the earth. That night, I dreamed of him. He stood at the foot of my bed, wearing the same shirt we had buried him in. The fabric was torn at the shoulder, and the soil still clung to his collar. His lips moved, but no sound came out, only a wet clicking like teeth grinding in a dry mouth. When I woke, there was dirt beneath my fingernails. And outside, the door waited. The 3rd day after the knocking, my father sent me to fetch water from the well at the edge of the village. I hated the task. The well was old, its stones slicked with moss, and the water tasted of iron. But worse than that was who lived nearby. Old Mother Kanya. The children called her a witch, though no one dared say it too loudly. Her hut leaned crooked beneath the weight of its thatched roof, bones of feathers dangling from the eaves like charms against something unseen. Some swore she had lived 3 lifetimes already, her hair white as cobwebs, her eyes sharp as a crow's. Others whispered she was no woman at all, but the last remnant of something older than the church. I tried not to look toward her hut as I lowered the bucket, but she was already waiting, hunched over her staff, her shadow bent the wrong way in the sun. "You've heard him," she said, as if greeting me. The rope burned my palms as I stopped lowering the bucket. "Heard who?" I asked, though the lie sat bitter on my tongue. She smiled without showing teeth. "Your brother who should not knock." My mouth dried. "How do you know?"
"Because the earth told me," she whispered, leaning closer. "The ironwood roots carry every secret into my dreams, and I know when the dead grow restless. They knock because they were not buried right, or worse, because they were buried with a debt unpaid." Her eyes shone sharp and wet. "Did he die with anger? Did he curse someone with his last breath? Did your family give him to the soil without giving him peace?" I thought of the funeral again, the coffin resisting the ropes, the holy water hissing on wood, the dogs howling at the grave. My chest tightened. "What does he want?" Mother Kanya's voice dropped low, a hiss like reeds in the wind. "He wants what every restless dead wants, to be welcomed back inside, to sit again at the fire, to eat salt and share breath with the living." She raised her crooked finger and tapped the air 3 times, thud, 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 just like Ilias's knock. "But once you open the door, you no longer keep him out. He keeps you in." I gripped the bucket hard enough for my knuckles to crack. "What should we do?" Her gaze slid past me, toward the fields where the ironwood tree hunched against the horizon. "Do nothing," she said. "Do not open the door. Do not speak his name. Do not dream of him." Her voice softened to a rasp. "And if he calls you by name, child, run, for the dead should not know the living anymore." The bucket slipped from my hands, crashing into the well with a splash. When I looked up, the old woman was gone, her doorway empty, her charms rattling like bones in the wind. That night, the knocking came again, and this time it was not only at the door. Something scratched at the windows.
The fourth night came heavy with rain. It did not fall in sheets, but in long, thin knives, hissing as they struck the earth. The roof leaked into bowls and pots, and every drop seemed to count the hours until midnight. We sat together by the fire, my father sharpening his knife, though the blade no longer needed it, my mother clutching her rosary until her knuckles whitened, and my sister asleep with her face hidden in my lap. None of us said it aloud, but we were waiting for the sound. The knocking. It came. 3 thuds, deliberate, rattling the wood as if the whole house were a drum. My father rose halfway, his chair scraping the floor, but he did not touch the door. My mother's lips moved fast over prayers that never reached their end. Then silence. Only the rain. We sat stiff as stones, listening for the voice we dreaded most. But none came. No whisper of, "Let me in," no trembling plea. Just the storm. When dawn broke gray and thin, I was the first to step outside. And there, on the threshold, was blood. Not a smear, not droplets, but a handprint, dark, wet, pressed deep into the wood as if seared there by heat. 5 fingers, long, familiar. Elias's.
I stumbled back, bile rising in my throat. My father came after me, saw it, and swore under his breath. He poured a bucket of water over it, but the stain did not wash away. It only spread, dark veins running down the door like roots sinking into soil. By afternoon, the village had gathered. Neighbors crossed themselves and whispered, some backing away as though the house itself were cursed. Others came closer, studying the mark with wide eyes. "It is a summons," one man muttered. "No," said another, "it is a warning." Old Mother Kenya stood among them, her staff planted firm in the mud. "He is not knocking anymore. Now he is claiming." My father barked at them all to leave, to take their superstitions with them. But when he turned back inside, I saw his hands tremble. That night, my mother placed bowls of salt in every corner of the house. She nailed iron nails into the door frame, whispering prayers with each strike. The fire burned until the logs crumbled, yet still the air felt cold, as if someone breathed through the cracks. And when I woke in the dark, heart pounding, I smelled something foul. On the floor by my bed lay wet footprints, muddy, wide, leading from the window toward the door. But the window was still locked. By the 5th night, the house had grown restless. It was not the wind that made the shutters groan, nor the rain that made the beams creak. The walls themselves seemed to breathe. The wood swelled with whispers, faint and shivering, like breath pressed too close to the ear. At first, I thought it was only me. I heard my name in the crack of the floorboards, in the hollow space behind the hearth, in the rafters above my bed, where spiders stitched their webs. Always low, always broken. "Brother." I woke to it more than once, heart pounding, skin damp with sweat. I pressed my ear to the plaster, and the voice came again,
muffled, as though spoken through a mouth full of soil. Cold, so cold. When I asked my mother if she heard it, she shook her head too quickly, her eyes refusing to meet mine. But her hands trembled when she kneaded the morning bread, as if they remembered a sound she would not name. My father, stubborn as the ironwood tree itself, claimed it was rats. He set traps along the walls, scattered crumbs laced with poison, and nailed the shutters tighter. Yet no rat ever showed itself, and still the voice crawled through the beams.
My little sister, Anna, was the only one who spoke plainly. One dawn, when the sky was pale and the rooster had not yet cried, I found her sitting in the corner, her face turned to the wall. Her lips moved, as though she whispered to someone hidden within it. "Anna?" I called softly. She turned her head, slow as a doll. Her eyes were wide, her cheeks streaked with dirt. "He says he's hungry," she whispered. "He says the ground fed him worms, but it's not enough." Her words chilled me worse than any winter wind. I took her by the shoulders, shaking her gently. "Don't listen. Don't speak to him. He's not—" But she pressed a finger to her lips. "If I don't answer, he scratches." And then I heard it. The faint scrape of nails, dragging long and deep through the wallboards behind her. That night, the whispers grew louder. They shifted from one corner of the house to the other, weaving through the beams like a voice carried in the marrow of the wood. Sometimes it was laughter, thin and broken. Other times it was sobbing. And once, as I lay awake in terror, it was a sound I will never forget. Teeth, grinding against teeth, slow and deliberate, as if chewing through bone. By dawn, when silence finally came, the house bore new scars. Thin cracks had split along the walls, curling like veins. And inside those cracks, I saw something dark, glistening. It was not sap. It was blood.
The ironwood tree stood at the far edge of the fields, where the soil turned black and the crows never left. Its bark was darker than night, coarse as old scars, and its branches reached upward like fingers straining to claw free from the earth. We buried Elias there because the priest insisted. "The tree holds the restless," he said. "Better they lie beneath its roots than walk among us." His voice shook as he spoke, though, as if he repeated a warning older than his holy book. In the village, no one planted near the tree. No one touched it. Some wouldn't even walk within its shadow. They said its wood burned too hot, and its smoke choked the lungs. They said if you carved your name into its bark, you'd never die a natural death. But the worst tale came from the elders, whispered only when drink loosened their tongues. Once, long ago, when famine thinned the fields and fever rotted the young, the villagers made a bargain. They gave their dead to the tree, not to rest, but to bind. The ironwood would swallow their souls, root and bone, holding them down so they could not rise. Yet bargains never hold forever. Sometimes, when the roots had drunk too deep, the dead clawed their way back. Their flesh was pale, their eyes full of soil, their voices carrying the hunger of the ground. They returned not for love, but for warmth, for breath, for salt, for the living things they had lost. And always they knocked. 3 times. Never 4. Never 2. Always 3. The elders warned that if you answered, if you let them cross the threshold, the ironwood would take its debt in flesh. The living would rot where they stood, and the dead would wear their skin as if it were borrowed cloth. These stories were not told to frighten children. They were told to keep doors locked at night. I thought of this as I walked past the tree one evening, sent by my father to fetch the cow that had strayed. The sun was low, the air copper with the scent of rain. The tree loomed against the horizon, its shadow long enough to swallow the path. And then I saw it. The soil above my brother's grave was not flat. It had risen, a swell in the earth like breath beneath a blanket. The grass around it was pale, shriveled, as though drained of color, and pressed into the dirt were handprints, deep, wide, clawed at the edges as if someone had tried to climb out. A crow perched on the lowest branch, its head tilted sideways, one beady eye fixed on me. Then it spoke, not in words, but in Elias's voice, broken and weak. "Let me in." I stumbled back, crossing myself, though my hands shook too hard to finish. The crow spread its wings, and when it lifted, something small and pale tumbled from its beak. A tooth. It landed in the dirt at my feet. I did not pick it up. The 7th night came without warning. A wind blew across the village, carrying the scent of wet soil and iron. It rattled the shutters, slipped beneath the door, and whispered through the cracks of the walls. My mother had been quieter than usual. She moved from room to room, her hands clutching her chest as if holding something inside. I watched her burn incense, mutter prayers, and pace the floor until dawn. But there were moments when her lips moved without sound, and her eyes, once warm, alive, glimmered with fear that was not meant for me. It was then that I remembered old Mother Kanya's words, "The dead come not for strangers, but for debts unpaid." I confronted my mother in the kitchen, her fingers trembling as she washed the same bowl over and over. "Mother," I said, my voice breaking the silence, "why won't you tell us why Elias, why now?" Her eyes darted to the corner, where shadows curled like smoke. Then she collapsed onto a chair, burying her face in her hands. "He's not just restless, he's angry. With us." "With us? What do you mean?" She looked up, and I saw tears streaking her face. "Before you were born, before he was buried, your father and I, we did something terrible, something I thought the earth would swallow, something we thought would never rise again." I pressed her. "What did you do?" She hesitated, then spoke in a voice. "When Elias was a boy, he saw something he should not have. He saw your father take the gold from old man Kamau's chest, the chest buried under the clay barn. He saw it, and he said nothing because he was a child. But your father, he did something to silence him.
just enough to bury the knowledge, but not enough to bury him completely. I felt the room tilt. "You mean—" "Yes," she said, her voice breaking. We bound him. Not fully, not enough to keep him. We thought the soil would take him. But now he is claiming what we owe. Not just the gold, but us, our lives, our peace." The wind howled like a living thing, rattling the shutters, and I heard it, the soft thud, thud, thud of a knock somewhere in the house. He had come back. Mother grabbed my hand, shaking. "You must understand, we never meant for this. We thought we were clever, but cleverness does not hold the dead. It never has." And then she spoke words I will never forget. "He is patient, but he is hungry. And the night he comes for you, he will not leave empty-handed." The lights flickered, and I felt the temperature drop. My mother shivered violently, clutching her chest. I thought I saw something move in the corner of the room. Something small and pale, a shadow not mine, sliding along the wall. The knocking began again, louder this time, and I knew, as the first drops of blood appeared on the threshold, that whatever debt we owed Elias, it had grown too large for mercy. The third night after Mother's confession came with a darkness that pressed against the windows and filled the corners of the house. The air smelled of wet clay and rot, as though the soil beneath the ironwood tree had followed us inside. I could not sleep. My father sat in the corner, staring at the knife in his hands, pale and silent. My mother huddled with Anna under a blanket, whispering prayers that fell into the shadows like rain. I could hear the walls whispering again, soft, low, unmistakably human. Then came the knock. 3 times. I froze. 3 thuds, precise, deliberate, shaking the doorframe as if it were trying to pull itself open. My stomach turned. I knew the rules, from Mother Kanya's warning and the ironwood tales. Answer the dead, and they claim you. Do nothing, and they tear at you until your own blood cries mercy. And tonight, we could not do nothing. The first knock was slow, almost hesitant. The second thud rattled the wood, and I swear it carried a sound like teeth gnashing. The third was a scream, pressed into the frame, a voice I knew better than any living one. "Let me in!" Mother trembled beside me. "Do not—"
But my father, stubborn and desperate, did what he thought was right. He yanked the door open. The air rushed in, cold and wet, and for a moment there was nothing. Then I saw him, Elias. Not as I remembered, not as we buried him. He was taller, his limbs stretched too long, pale with the gray of soil still clinging to his skin. His eyes were hollow, but they burned with something alive, something angry. His mouth opened, wet with soil, and he smiled, not at me, not at mother or father, but at the house itself, as if it were a toy he had waited to play with. "I am home," he said. And then the walls groaned. The ceiling shuddered. Shadows peeled from the corners and wrapped themselves around the furniture. The air became thick, heavy, and I realized the house itself was alive with him. My mother fell to her knees. "We opened it! We opened it!" she screamed.
Elias stepped inside, and with each step the floorboards groaned like bones. The blood that had appeared on the doorstep before now spread across the threshold, crawling toward the hearth, toward us, as if it were a living thing. Anna whispered his name, small and trembling, and he stopped. His head tilted, his gaze passing over her, then me, then my parents. "You know why I am here," he said. "You buried me, but you left me wanting. You stole from me, from what I was meant to have. Now—" He raised a hand, long fingers stretching like branches. "Now I take." The air froze. My father lunged with the knife, but it passed through Elias as if he were smoke. My mother tried to speak, to beg, but no words came. And I understood. Elias had crossed the boundary. The third night had come. Once you answer the dead 3 times, they do not leave. They do not ask. They do not wait. They take. And as the shadows engulfed us, I felt it. The debt had been claimed. By the 9th night, the village had stopped whispering. No one dared approach our house. Even the wind seemed to skirt around it, carrying only silence and the faint tang of iron. Inside, the air had grown thick and black, heavy with the scent of earth and decay. Shadows pooled in corners, shifted along walls, and lingered on the floor as if watching, waiting. The knocking had become constant, no longer polite, no longer measured, just a relentless rhythm, thud, 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 echoing in our bones. We had tried everything: salt, iron nails, prayers, burning incense. All useless. Elias did not knock anymore. He walked. That night,
we heard the door creak. Slowly, inexorably, it swung open on its own, though no hand touched it. A cold draft swept in, carrying the damp smell of the ironwood tree. And there he was, Elias, taller, thinner, his skin pale gray with soil, his eyes hollow but burning with an unnatural fire. He stepped over the threshold, and the floorboards groaned beneath him. Shadows clung to his ankles and trailed behind him like ribbons of smoke. "My turn," he whispered, voice low but slicing through the house like a knife. "Your debt is mine." Mother fell to her knees, screaming prayers that did nothing. Father raised his knife, trembling, but the blade passed through Elias like air. Anna hid behind me, silent, her face pale, her eyes wide with terror. He walked slowly into the living room, and with each step, the air grew colder, the shadows thicker. The walls themselves seemed to lean in, groaning as if welcoming him home. And then the first of them appeared. Figures, pale and broken, emerged from the walls, their mouths moving soundlessly. I realized with a sick horror. They were the others, the debts from long ago, the restless souls buried beneath the ironwood tree, now called forward by Elias. Each one stepped closer, their eyes hollow, their hands reaching. Elias turned to us, smiling. "Do you see now?" he asked. "The living cannot hide from the dead. They wait, they knock, and when you open, you belong to us." The shadows surged. The temperature dropped so low my breath froze in the air. The first hand touched my arm, icy and strong, and I screamed. And then I felt it, the floor beneath me soften, as if the earth itself had risen to claim me. I tried to pull free, but something held me, dragging me toward the shadows pooling near the hearth. Mother screamed, Father shouted, Anna cried, but their voices were swallowed. Elias stepped closer, and I saw the truth in his eyes. He was not my brother anymore. He was something older, hungrier, a creature of earth and darkness, bound to the ironwood tree's curse. "Welcome home," he said. The door slammed behind him, and in that moment I knew, this house, this village, our lives, our blood, they belong to him now. And the night laughed. When dawn finally broke, it brought no light, only a gray haze that clung to the village like a shroud. The house stood at the edge of the field, silent. Not a bird sang, not a dog barked, not a child laughed. The wind had stopped, leaving only the heavy, metallic scent of earth and blood. No one dared enter. The villagers whispered at a distance, crossing themselves and muttering old Mother Kanya's warnings. Some claimed they saw shadows moving behind the windows, figures tall and pale, staring outward with hollow eyes. Others swore they heard soft knocks at midnight, 3 thuds, no more, no less, carried from the direction of our abandoned home. Inside, the house was empty of life, but full of presence. The floors bore scratches that led in endless loops. The walls oozed damp soil, and in the corners faint forms lingered, shapes that were not shadows, yet not living flesh either.
And always, somewhere, 3 knocks echoed. The villagers learned not to ask what had happened to us. Those who came too close vanished in the night, or returned days later with pale eyes and trembling hands, muttering about whispers in the walls and the cold touch of fingers that were not their own. Some nights I think I hear it too, from somewhere beyond the forest, from the ironwood tree itself, a voice, familiar yet not, calling softly, "Let me in." And though I am far from the house, far from the village, I know the truth. The dead do not forgive. They do not forget. And when the door opens, no matter how long you think it is closed, they come. The silence that followed our family is not peace, it is waiting. And in every village that grows near ironwood trees, beneath every soil that carries a debt unpaid, the dead remember. They knock, they watch, and they take. The story of our house became a warning, a whispered curse. Children dare each other to touch the threshold. Farmers leave iron nails at their doors. And old Mother Kanya, long gone now, left her staff leaning against a tree in the forest, a reminder. The living belong to the dead only as long as they think they do, because once the door opens, it never closes again.